would it be recorded? And so we're really happy to do that. So as I was saying, the crew from Crib Point, Tina, Coumbe, the principal, Shona McLean and Kerry Sorensen are with us from Crib Point. Angela Fisher, early childhood teacher from Crib Point Kinder, which is a separate location. Jenny Brennan, principal from Wallaroo Primary, and Megan Ingram, who is director and speech pathologist at Peninsula Speech Pathology. So welcome to you all. And just very quickly about the MPF, we are a place-based foundation formed in 2017 by Chair Ian Hicks and in collaboration with Deputy Chair Andrew Fairley and founding director Dr. Genevieve Timmins. A great team to start us off, and we've started pretty quietly. Our whole purpose is to be very connected to the people this work is all about. And really we try to raise awareness and to take some action about the disparity that exists on the absolutely beautiful Mornington Peninsula, which some people don't have the opportunity to enjoy as much as others. I noticed the other day when I was doing some preparation for something that it's just 23 kilometres from one of the wealthiest yacht clubs in the country to an area that has consistently over the last couple of decades recorded a different sort of statistic, and that is in the top levels of disadvantage in the state. And the proximity is really kind of crazy. It's so close. And I know, Jenny, you often speak about this, about Wallaroo, and Jenny will tell us more about some of the statistics that really highlight what it actually means in the community. So, but what through the work with our amazingly generous donors, we have been able to get to know the community. Our whole purpose is to try and understand what is needed, what are the drivers of this perpetuation of intergenerational disadvantage, and we learn every single day from the partners that we have. We are grateful every day for the relationships that we have, for the trust that we have, and for the information flow that we have from our donors and from our community partners. And it's truly in building networks that we're able to understand the drivers that everyone has in their lives and how to make things better for more people. It's certainly not about building empires, it's about building networks, and those networks now extend to the state and local government, to academic institutions, to small consultancies, many of whom do work pro bono for us, and some of whom are here today, to major trusts and foundations, family foundations and individuals, and of course our community partners and volunteer groups. We're absolutely delighted to have the network that we do have, and it's in joining together that we can really make a difference. So please jump in at any point if you'd like to engage in the conversation, but we'll start off now by talking about No Limits, and this is probably the biggest project that that MPF has had the privilege to be involved with. And really it was started off with a conversation around a table with some really passionate principals who just said, this isn't working. Like, there's a big issue in our schools. If things aren't working and we can't change it, we need some help to change it. And we said, what is it that you want to do? And together they came up with what we call No Limits. And I just love the name because it's all about stopping the limitations for these kids and these families, which are part of the system that we have. So we boldly went to donors and they generously came back to us, and within a relatively short time we were able to start No Limits, and that was in 2019. It's just been a fantastic ride, and you know, COVID has tried to derail it many times. The tenacity of the principals and the teachers has just not let that happen. So I'd love to just throw to you, Tina, and say, what is No Limits and how did it start?
Okay, thank you for that. So we've got the great privilege of working quite closely with Angela at Crib Point Kinder, and Angela and I often communicate about our students and things like that. And I happened to have popped down to the Kinder one day, and we were talking about the cohort of students that we were getting coming to the following year, and there were a number of them. Angela said to me, look, you know, you go up and introduce yourself and say hello to a couple of these little ones. And I sort of turned around and went, wow, we really need some help here. and with the articulation and the speech and things like that. And I came back to school and I went, I just don't know how we're going to be able to help these little poppets. So I got on the phone to Steph and I said, Steph, I think I need a speech therapist. I need some help. So that sort of started the course of, it was a little project that we started for a year to trial. This amazing person over here, Shona. So Shona is our speech therapist aide who's attached to that program. And sorry, the girls are going to jump in. So, and the work that it's done on the ground. So we have these amazing speeches that we come in from Megan's company. They work with our students, and then over the next fortnight, the people on the ground actually put the program into place and work one-on-one with our little ones. We did it for a year and we tracked the data, and we always, I know Robin's heard this before and I know so has Sue, we had the sea of red. We had spreadsheets that were just all red, and by the end it was a sea of green, which was amazing. So it was the skills that the little ones had achieved. So when we all sort of looked at the data really closely, Steph said, I feel we need to upscale this into other schools and kinders and things like that. So that's sort of where the program's led to. But one of the most amazing things about it is that we did suspect COVID would make a dent in our program, but it actually has had some really quite unexpected, beautiful things happen with it. So we were able to convert speech therapy onto Zoom, which was quite an achievement. One of the really fantastic things out of it has been, though, that we've had a much greater increase in parent participation and parent support and parent understanding, because these programs normally happen at school, and your little person comes home and goes, how was your day? What did you do? Nothing. But there's all these amazing things that have happened during the day. And so this has actually given parents a fantastic insight, which they probably wouldn't have normally had, into the strength of the program, which has been quite phenomenal. So in terms, I think we've had, what's our uptake? Is it 100%, like 100% participation?
Yeah.
So we've actually had 100% participation of 34 preps over Zoom during COVID, which we find extraordinary. So it's been quite incredible. But I've asked Kerry just to share a really quick little story with you about her own son.
Yeah, so my youngest one, Toby, he had speech issues. So he's autistic. He's also ADHD, sensory processing. He's got a number of issues that he faces. And I did take him to a speech therapist because he has what's called pragmatic language, which means but anyway, long story short, we took him to the speech therapist and he knew he was going to an appointment, and he just went completely nonverbal, would not speak. He realised that she wanted him to speak, so he would just go nonverbal. We weren't getting anywhere, so we ended up leaving it, and he got to school. I get teary when I talk about this. He did the speech program in prep, and by the end, he was actually up to the same level as all the other kids in speech. And that was something we couldn't achieve outside of school because he was already seeing a psychologist and an OT. And so he was over-therapized, as they say, outside of school, but being able to do it at school, it was just another activity. And he ended up with a really beautiful bond with the aide. It was before Shona, with the aide that was doing it at the time. And he just went ahead and leaps and bounds. He's now academically ahead in maths and literacy. And I don't think that would have been the case if he hadn't have done this program. He's got, he's still funded under severe behaviour and he has his moments, but academically he's right up there because he's on an even playing field with all the other kids. So yeah, that's my personal story as a mum. And as a staff member at the school, I can't tell you how many of those stories there are. It's just phenomenal. The difference, what seems like such a small thing, the impact it's having on these kids, and it's their whole life, because they're starting their education and that changes their whole life. It really does. So thank you so much.
That's amazing, Kerry. It's just wonderful to hear it firsthand from you. I think it, tells us really how important it is at the early years. But I think I'd be right in saying that, we've all thought about literacy as being incredibly important in education, but have we always thought that speech itself was so important? But Megan, perhaps I could ask you, like, can you tell us, from your practitioner's point of view, what speech therapy is and how it's linked so closely to literacy and why it's so important at this stage to help children like Toby?
Yeah, absolutely. So speech therapy, I think, traditionally has been kind of placed in a box where it's just about how your talking sounds. But speech therapists really work with all aspects of communication. So it comes from a place that communication is a basic human right, and that's what we work to achieve, that everybody can communicate their ideas and their wants to other people. To do that, though, we do need to have words and vocabulary. We need quite a large vocabulary to describe things in really close detail. Sorry, of course, I've got a frog in my throat right now. So kids need to have a variety of words. The more specific our words are, the clearer that we can paint a picture for the people who are listening to us. So we need to have lots of words. We need to put those words in sentences. And then we also apply things when we're talking to people about whether it happened yesterday or whether it's going to happen tomorrow. So we need to use grammar. So we need to get our words in the right order and put some grammar in there too, so that our message is clear. So we need the words, but we also need to put them in the right order. Then when we've got that happening, we need to articulate them really clearly. So this is making the sounds with our mouth and our teeth so that they can be understood. So as Tina was saying before, when she visited Angela, there was a lot of kids in Angela's room that maybe had some amazing things to say, but nobody could understand them because their tongue wasn't moving in the right way. So to communicate, we need words, we need them in the right order, and we need to say them really clearly. And then some kids also have fluency issues. So this is what you might know as stuttering, where they have their ideas, but they can't get them out in a really clear way. And that can really affect kids' mental health and the frustration that they feel, that they know what they want to say, but they can't get their message across. And another aspect of what speech pathologists work on is also that social or that pragmatic language that we were just talking about then. If we've got amazing things to say, but if we don't follow the rules of when we're spending time with other people, such as taking turns to talk or talking on the same topic, giving enough information, our communication may not work. So speech pathologists work on all of these things. Now, part of the work that we do also includes something called phonemic awareness. And it's a big kind of fancy word, but phonemic awareness is the strongest predictor of reading outcomes for kids. And all it is, it's about using our language to break words down into pieces. So it's about hearing the first sound in a word like sun, that the first sound in it is a sound. It's being able to break those words into pieces, but also putting them back together. To have good phonemic awareness skills, we need to have good language skills and good vocabulary skills. So speech pathologists work with kids to have lots of words, get them in the right order so that they can be understood, communicate them really clearly, so getting their tongue and their teeth and their lips moving so they can be clear, so that they can do all of that really well, so that then they can look at the bits and break words down to get onto the literacy piece.
So Megan, when you started with this program, what did you find was the sort of level of development in the schools and kinders?
Yeah, look, absolutely. When we first started, we were anticipating coming in for the language piece. So really building kids' language up, their ability to tell stories and use vocabulary very specifically. and then also that phonemic awareness piece. But what we actually found was there was a really high incidence of that speech disorder or articulation. So we had a lot of kids who couldn't make the sounds really well. And that obviously also impacts, if we're getting kids to listen to the sounds in words to spell cat, but they actually say cat like tat, it's going to be really hard for them to lay down the right connections between what the sound sounds like to what the letter is that we write down. So what we were really surprised about was the amount of time that we had to spend on the articulation or the speech skills. We also found that kids had lower vocabulary. So they might have had just 1 or 2 words to describe things. This is the example I use all the time, but they might have had big to describe something that was big, but they didn't have words like huge or gigantic or any of those words that would really be a lot more specific. So they were some of the things that stood out. The phonemic awareness was also very low, which was with the language results being where they were, that was expected. But we also found in that first year that those phonemic awareness skills just soared just by spending some really explicit kind of teaching and working with the teachers and the educational supports to really support that development.
Megan, I think, and Steph, I think it'd be also fair to say we were really, really genuinely surprised with, we thought when the speeches came in, we thought there'd be like X amount of percentage of students that needed that support. We found at the time, I think we were 28 students out of 29.
Yeah.
This year we've got 34 out of 34. Like, we were genuinely really shocked with the amount of students that needed that support.
I think it was the red in the graph, wasn't it, Tina?
Yeah.
And it did seem to be pretty similar across all of the schools and kinders in the start, that there were really very high needs. Jenny, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about Wallaroo and the level of oral language that children come to school with, but also, and I did check this with Jenny. Jenny's school has the highest, lowest ICSIA score on the Peninsula, and Jenny can tell us what that is and what it means, and it'll just put things in context perhaps for us here. And Jenny, how does No Limits respond to those issues which the children come with?
All right, thanks, Steph. We actually have had a slight increase in our score this year, so it's interesting, or 2020, I should say. So we're currently at 910. So usually anything below 1,000, you have that level of disadvantage. So 910. Previously we were about 857. So we have had a slight increase, but a lot of our funding is determined based on our SFOs, so our student family occupation list. So at the moment, we're at 0.83. So what that means is basically the level of need is about 83 families to our 100 students. And our education level for our parents is at 0.79. So again, that means that 79 of our 100 families don't have the required education or level of work or so on to be able to, I guess, get out of that cycle that a lot of our families are stuck in. Speaking about how our students come their first day of school and they arrive, with our transition program, and we have a pretty good transition program, we can get that idea of how our kiddos present on the first day of school. And they're anywhere between 18 to 24 months behind in the learning of the average of their peers or that with the rest of the state. So for instance, we'll have students that will arrive who have difficulty saying their own name correctly. Very social stuff. They don't know how to greet you. They don't know how to ask to be able to participate in a play activity because they've never had that. A lot of our children are spoken at, not have a conversation with in their homes. So when they come to school, it's this huge opportunity because they get to work alongside peers, they get to work in a safe space with adults that are actually having a conversation with them and waiting to hear their response in turn. And that's important and that's valued. Again, they often don't have that experience at home. And I don't want to blanket to everybody, but that has been the majority of our students' experiences. This is their safest space. So the fact that they get to come and they get to work with lots of different people that they really, really trust and enjoy. So we've been lucky enough, we've had Carrie the whole time, our speechy. And we also have Carrie, and she works with some of our older kids as well. So she's just one of the staff, you know, that she's a trusted adult and that our students have no problem going with her. We last year with COVID, we had a fantastic rate of our families turning up online, as what Tina said. We haven't been so lucky this time around. What we are finding is this COVID fatigue with our families. They hung on for as long as they could, and many of them it's too hard now. It's far, far too hard. So we have a lot of our students on site. So the littlies that probably need it most are still getting access. But what our ES has done is each lesson that normally would be able to present face-to-face is now converted into a seesaw activity with our ES recording messages and so on. So even if, let's say, they're not there for that Zoom session, they then have that opportunity to participate whilst on site with the ES and work through the activities. It's not live, but they're still getting that. And that's how we've been able to adjust and modify the lessons as best as we can to meet our students' needs in the current climate, while we have parents that are just not coping.
And Jenny, I think you were telling me that food is a big issue in your school as well. And
absolutely.
So you've been providing food for the families?
Yes. So where we have Healthy Eats at Wallaroo, and I'm sure that there's some people here that knows all about it, we would provide lunches for our students, and we'd rotate through. Every class would get a lunch once a week. And it'd be nutritious, made from scratch, with ingredients that many of them had never had before. And it was a community aspect. So, and they're missing out on that. But due to just a higher increase of unemployment and so on, and our families really struggling, we've always provided food hampers. But what we're finding is it is at a level that it's weekly now, where we used to do it at the start, middle, and if anyone else needed it, they'd call us, and then towards the end to get them through to the holidays. Now it's weekly. They're constantly made and they're sitting there. And because we've had this heightened where you can't have any contact, we're just putting them in the car park now and sending out a message to families. We're not tracking who's collecting them. We're not saying how many you have to take and you're only allowed one. No, just come, and every day they're gone. And then we'll put more out there and the message out again, and every Friday, and they're just collected. So food is a huge, huge concern.
I think our schools on the Peninsula are much more than schools, and our principals are more than principals. They are truly our unsung heroes in the community, and they reach to people who are incredibly vulnerable, who are largely invisible in our society. The work that they do above and beyond the day-to-day is just incredible. Angela, I know you've got a classroom with you now, and it's lucky that you've been able to stay on with us for this time. I think the principals were all, when we started No Limits, really, really keen for the kinders, their feeder kinders, to be involved, and I think that speaks very much to the need that we have for prevention and early intervention. So I wondered, Angela, if you could tell us about what No Limits is in for the kinder and the specific needs that your children have.
Thanks, Stephanie. So what we found is that a lot of our children come to kinder, particularly at my service. We cater for such a vulnerable community that many of them are starting at 3 and already have significant delay in their language and communication skills. And as all parents speak to their children, you can pretty much always understand your child because you compensate for that. So for the children presenting to us, this is usually the first place that they've come, and it's not family. So No Limits has provided us with the opportunity to work through and assess the children and point them in the direction to get support early. The earlier they get support, the better the outcomes are. And not only have we been able to refer the children on, but we've also been able to educate the parents on how they can help their children at home, how they can get the most out of their social interactions and their reading and just their conversations with the children. This year we started implementing a program where we give the families books, and we even provide them with paperwork and activities. Everything for our children is always play-based, so it'll be games and activities like follow the leader, but we've even included questions on how to engage with your child about the book. During COVID, we've been recording ourselves reading the books and having these interactions. There's no response, obviously, because it's a video, but the parents are then able to copy our modelling of reading the story and things like that. This year, we've been lucky enough to have our own literacy support person who is able to spend 100% of her time focused on working with the children. We still get a high portion of our children wearing nappies and not toilet trained and having high needs across all areas of their development. So we were finding that the two standard educators couldn't devote as much time to the program as they wanted to. We would sit down with a group of 4 children and start an experience with them about prepositions, for example, and then somebody would need a nappy change or somebody would need to be taken to the toilet. So with the introduction of Louise, she sits at a place where the children don't disturb her in her small group, and they work on that. And while Nicole and I cater for the other needs of the children. And this year we've also seen quite low social emotional skills with our children presenting, and so we have Louise is focusing on language where Nicole and I are able to focus on their social skills as well.
Fantastic. It's really important, I think, to perhaps we should say exactly what No Limits does. So in terms of the structure of it, and this was really built on the year that Tina spoke about in 2018, this pilot program. Well, we didn't know it was a pilot at the time, but it turned out that we used it as such. So once a fortnight, the speech pathologist visits each site. There are 12 sites, 6 primary schools and 6 feeder kinders. So the benefit of working with Megan and Peninsula Speech Pathology is that she oversees the team of therapists that visit the schools and the kinders. They work in a consistent way, they deliver a consistent program, they have their own community of practice, they share ideas, they share resources, and they bring a holistic view to the program. In addition to that, each site has an educational support person. So in the schools, that's Shona is the speech therapist at Crib Point, and so Shona would visit once a fortnight, and each site would have that same visit. But
Shona's our speech pathology aide, so she runs the program.
I thought so. I was getting confused. So Shona is the assistant who implements the program during the days between the fortnightly visits. And clearly someone else should explain this. Perhaps we could jump to you, Tina, and the team to tell us exactly how it's implemented at the school.
She's going, I'm not talking.
Hi, everyone.
So do you want to explain your program, how it works in the classroom?
Yeah, so I meet with the children daily, and we group the kids depending on their needs, and you know, we spend a lot of time doing the Read It Again program, as well as grouping them for articulation with the support of Danny, who is incredible, the speech pathologist. She guides me the whole way, which is just incredible. So I'm able to implement everything that she gives me, and I'm able to, I suppose, pick her brain and have her support there to be able to read it again, and especially our tics that, yeah, really important one in the classroom. And I'm always learning and I'm always taking on new things, and thanks to Danny, she's able to give me the skills to be able to do the articulation groups with the students and really focus on that.
Fantastic.
And can I just add that we found that because we do have a number, we're nearly reaching a quarter of our students on site, and we found Shona's actually, fortunately, just lives up the road, but Shona's actually popping in every day to actually make sure those students on site get their program as well as the students on Zoom, because we've got I think 7 or 8 little ones for preppy on site every day. And so Shona's actually popping in for an hour every day and making sure they get their program, because she's a fairly determined lady who's determined they're going to get their skills. And so she's coming in every day to make sure that they're getting their program still, which is just awesome.
And those kids that are on site are our most vulnerable. So it's been amazing to be able to have that one-on-one time with them. I think that is just so important, and it's made a huge difference.
And if we're talking about perhaps a big objective of the program being literacy and being able to read, Megan talks about the reading bus, which I find quite a good analogy, and that bus pretty well departs at the end of year 2 or the beginning of year 3, and for children who aren't on it, it's really, really hard to catch it up. So basically we talk about children learning to read in the first 3 years, and then reading to learn as they travel away on that bus. And what we've found with the schools, and particularly in Western Port and the Learning Enhancement Program, is that literally 3 out of 10 were at level in transitioning from primary to secondary school, which was a really big challenge for the secondary school, and which has been the impetus for a lot of the work that the schools have been undertaking. So if we see that the reading level is so low by the end of year 6 and trace it back, we realise just how many kids don't get on that bus. And that's what this whole thing is about. So perhaps Jenny or Tina, Megan, you could talk to us about how it's actually impacting the reading of the children now that it's been nearly 3 years that we've been doing the program.
I'm happy to have a chat. Is that all right?
Thanks,
I'll put my hand up. So what we're finding, where we are a small school, it's easy to track the individual student. And we're finding that through the impact and the work with No Limits, that they have had a better vocabulary, a better chance to be able to have that conversation, and how that translates to them being able to read. It's almost like they've developed these pre-reading skills, if you want to look at vocab like that. And with their reading, I know that we don't have the scores for NetPlan to discuss or anything like that, but we're finding that we have more students that are at level or that are in our extension group than we have ever had before. And that's continuing. What we're also able to do is put the skills that we have learned with No Limits and apply that to those that might need intervention in older grades. And Carrie has been doing phenomenal work with that as well. So whilst it's hard to plug those gaps, we've been able to do that to just keep things going at the rate that they are. But it also translates over into their numeracy, because now they have that better understanding of literacy. They can unpack worded problems at a greater rate. They can apply their understanding, their reasoning skills, and like it's everything. It's not just being able to have a simple conversation. It's so much more than that, and how it is improving their overall learning. And it's really incredible, and it's really wonderful.
Wow, that's fantastic, Jenny. It's and I love the way you speak of your kids. You know, it's always so endearing and beautiful. And Tina, have you sort of experienced the same sort of changes?
Absolutely. We've also found that because we've been a part of the program a bit longer than the other schools, we've actually also found that we've tracked the data. We are finding definitely, I completely agree with what Jenny is, and Shona can talk to it because she's in the prep room every day. We're finding that our students are meeting benchmark earlier. But also what we have found is we've also gone the next step, and we've introduced Sounds Right, which is a phonemic awareness based program, a phonological approach as they call it. And we've actually implemented that whole school now, which is having some quite incredible results. We've trained all of our classroom teachers. Shona and 3 of my other education support staff are trained. I have someone at each level who can then we can do it at a whole class level, but I've got specialised people who can then go and take a small group if need be, or go and do one-on-one. So we've actually found the prep teacher, Rosemary, and I know Shona has said that at the moment, the biggest impact we're seeing is actually on the students' writing, and they're probably a couple of months ahead of where they would normally have been in their writing. And that's prep during COVID. So, but it's a very genuine whole school approach. The school's involved with the training. The principals did the training as well, so that we have a really good understanding of what it looks like on the ground. 5 days, it was pretty full on, but it was amazing. And so we're finding that as well. We're increasing every teacher, every person in the school. We're increasing our capacity to teach literacy.
So I think that sort of brings us to this idea of sustainability and the role that philanthropy has in any sort of systems change. And this really is about systems change. It's not about a band-aid onto a broken system. It's about how does it change from within. And it's been fascinating to work with all the schools. They're at sort of different stages of this change, but in order for it to become perpetual, it does need to be embedded within the school. And I think we're seeing that very much at Crib Point, also at Tyab Rail, and as Jenny's saying, with Wallaroo. And the key part of it is this work becoming integral and becoming part of the way a school operates. We know that schools in Victoria are some of the most autonomous in the country. A huge amount of autonomy is evolved from the Department of Education to individual schools. The department doesn't tell schools what they should do. They have policy settings, but they don't instruct them in what program or whatever that they should do. And so it's up to schools to really work out how they're going to operate, and so with philanthropy, when they come and say we really need to do this because of this, we can play that sort of catalytic role, or that role where there's seed funding, where there's a bit of risk capital, and we can allow people to try things out. But we always have an idea on how is this going to be sustainable. That's a really key part of anything that MPF does, because we can't be there forever, and true change comes from within the community. Anyway, that's what change is, and it's been really remarkable to see it happening in these schools. But we've also had a chance to allow schools to develop themselves and to have a go. So we didn't set it out at the beginning, say this is the program and it has to be done in this way. There was always a bit of flexibility about it, and I think it's allowed it to really grow. And one of the critical things we've learned is that the having our Cheryl Chappell is the monitors the program, the implementation and so on, and she's very close to each of the sites, and that's been a fantastic benefit to the success of the implementation, and a lot of data collection as well. So we're in the process now of having an external review of all of the data that's been collected, so we can get a very objective assessment of the program to date to see where it's going. And hopefully we'll be continuing it. I know all the schools and kinders want to continue it, and we're just in the process of trying to work out how we do that. But one thing I think is really important to note, and that's the availability of speech pathologists. With the NDIS, it's a fantastic thing in so many ways, but it's also had some other impacts. Megan, perhaps you could tell us about the changes that we see there. We know that there's always been a long waiting list for speech pathology, a really long waiting list. What this program does is it compensates for that, but now people just can't get them, can they?
It's very hard to recruit a speech pathologist these days. If you've got children that are looking for a great career, maybe speech or OT is it. So with the NDIS, it's opened up a beautiful, a lot of funding, but it's also meant whenever you put money in a sector, it means incredible growth. So there's a lot of new places to work for speech pathologists. So it's really hard. We're not producing enough new graduates to fill the need. So this is where programs like this, which can show innovation and do things in a different way and still achieve those kind of outcomes, it's gold in the current environment. So, yeah.
So does anyone have any questions or people? Tina?
Can I just jump in? Can I just, through the public health system, there's wait lists of up to 12 months at this point for some of these services. So the fact that it's an absolute blessing that we get to have a speech pathologist on site. As Angela and I have had lengthy conversations about the complexity of parents coming into our programs, into our schools and kinders with no early intervention. And Jen would be the same as well. And so to have these programs on site is quite phenomenal, because it means we can put that intervention into place so much more quickly than if our parents were to access the public healthcare system, which is unfortunately so overserviced and in such huge demand that, as I said, we can be waiting for 12 months for a little one to be on a waiting list. That's 12 months of that little poppet not being heard, or not having the voice, or not being able to have people understand, can I get a drink, or can I go to the toilet, and things like that. So the fact that we've been able to have it at kinder and prep really does make such an incredible difference, because we genuinely have a lot of families coming in with kids with such complexity that have had no early intervention. They haven't been to a paediatrician, they haven't been to a speechy, they haven't been to an OT and things like that. And we're starting from scratch. But the beautiful thing is often we're able to send them off with a speech screener and go, we've already done this, we've already done part of the work. So the journey becomes a little bit more easier for the parents and the family, because we've already started that journey for them. So it makes a tremendous difference.
I think access.
Sorry, Stephanie, I just wanted to share our experience this year, because it really highlights the issue we're talking about with no speechies. We have 35 children within our group this year. There's only 4 children that are not trying to access service. I've got 4 children that have been sitting on waiting lists for 10 months and they haven't seen anybody. And so they are going to head off to school now without accessing that external speech therapist. And if it wasn't for No Limits, we wouldn't be having the targeted activities that Danny has been supporting us to implement. And then once Danny leaves, we also then share that with the parents so they can support their child at home, where if we weren't part of No Limits, that child would just be waiting. They'd be in no man's land, just sitting there, not receiving the service or the help that they need. And most of my children can't do simple things like explain that they want to go to the toilet.
Really brings it home. I think it's with the other work that we're involved with through MPF, it's access to services that's a really key issue. Homelessness, for example, until we were able to fund a housing and homelessness service in Hastings, there was nothing. I mean, people needed to go to Frankston or to Dandenong, and we know public transport's a really major issue, but if you're homeless, you don't have a lot of resources. And in the time we've been funding it, which is just over 2 years, they've seen nearly 400 clients, many of whom have been securely and safely housed as a result of the work. It's a big issue on the Peninsula where the services are and how people are expected to access them. And
I think Steph, also one of the other things that you and I've talked about in the past is we make some big assumptions because we go, we're only 8 minutes or 9 minutes from Hastings. That's not far. You know, parents can get their kids to services in Hastings. That's assuming that the parents can pay for petrol.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that they've actually got a car.
Yeah.
So we had a family last week who desperately was in need of food, and we said we can provide all this support and things like that, but they didn't have the petrol to actually get in the car to come to school. So we then went and picked up petrol vouchers and things like that and did a home delivery. And I just think it's very easy because people go, it's only up the road. I don't understand what's the big deal.
Yeah.
But we assume that they've got access to those services and they don't necessarily always do.
A lot of assumptions, I think. So, Izzy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Hello, everyone. I haven't met many or any, in fact, of the people in this room. My name is Zoe McKenzie. I serve on the board of the Committee for the Mornington Peninsula, and I'm good friends with Andrew Fairley, who introduced me to Stephanie, who kindly invited me to come along today, but possibly more relevantly, have worked for significant periods of time in education policy at both the federal and state level. And I can't help but listen to this and think, my goodness, how can the system that's supplied for and paid for by taxpayers have let down this community so severely? You have an extraordinary program on foot with great results. But as a kind of policymaker, I think, why was this not being identified or assisted through existing programs, or in particular through COVID programs? So I think the state government has got 6,000 school tutors. Where are they? How are they not helping with this? How can that not be a service that's readily identified as one needed on the Peninsula? And also it fills me with abject horror about, you know, NAPLAN scores. We had this great relief last week in which, oh, look, NAPLAN, everything's fine. Everything's clearly not fine. And it's maybe that we're testing for the wrong things, or that the problems haven't fully become apparent yet. But there's a real discord between what system says it is doing for the public and what I'm hearing from you. And they're not hard to spot as high need schools. They're high need schools. What's happening? Have we seen any of those tutors provided for by the government in the COVID era? Can they be useful in any way to this? Is it just that they're providing skills in the wrong area? That speech therapy is much more important than whatever those 6,000 tutors are doing? Why is the system letting us down?
Well, we do have tutors in our schools. So each school is allocated X amount of dollars based on your particular area and level of need. And then you had to choose as a school, where would you funnel that? Would you funnel that towards numeracy or literacy? And then in literacy, targeting reading. So most schools have targeted reading. What we did was we split ours up, and then we backed it with X amount of dollars from equity. And we have funded reading and we have funded numeracy. So we have 2 tutors going. The money that we were given was for 26 weeks. We have extended that with our own school resources, and we've gone the whole year. So we have 2, let's say 1 full day equivalent of 2 teachers that work with groups of kids. Now, based on that COVID money, it was to be used to play catch up of those students that fell behind because of COVID. And then as a school, you have to differentiate between who fell behind 6 months behind, because you have to have those quick wins, right? Who fell behind 6 months because of COVID and who's disadvantaged? Well, at Wallaroo, it's one and the same. Everybody. So everyone gets support. Now now you have one person that targets reading for 100 students that are affected. How do you do that with the level of funding? And so then what we had to initially start, we thought, okay, we have so many kiddos that have need. Let's spread ourselves thin. Let's target as many things as we can. Then you have to pull the data together and prove to the department that you used the money correctly. Well, our data, our kids weren't hitting where they should have been. And then they say, well, why? Well, because the need is too high and there's not enough resources. So then we have scaled back and we have a target group that we're now working on, because we have to prove that this money has made a difference. So it's not necessarily about need, it's about proving that it's hit the spot. And where a need for us is so vast, targeting one particular area with that little bit of money, we're not hitting it. So we have spread it much farther. Also, with those that need it the most, unless they are on site, they're not getting the support right now. So we're creating our groups with our tutors are incredible. They are our numeracy leading teacher and our literacy leader. So we've actually funded our staff that have had our training, that are very good at what they do. But if the families don't come and meet us halfway and attend the sessions, it's not happening. If they're on site, they access it. And that's kind of I think what we're finding this time around, that parent capacity isn't there and what it was to the same degree that it was last year, even in, lockdown 4, 5. This time around, I don't know, there's just been a shift where we're just hearing much more about parent mental health and that they're not coping, and they just want to just not be involved in the program at all, school in general, I mean, and want to wait till everyone's back on site. So I know that was a bit convoluted, me going around in a circle, but I just wanted to, that money has been incredibly powerful. It's important because we're able to do things with it, but did it hit the mark? No, not at all.
So we could have a whole afternoon on exactly your question. And what happens on the ground people in policy don't know about. There's a massive disconnect, and that's what all of our work is about.
And can I just make a comment about NetPlan? Sorry.
Yes, please.
That amazing announcement of how great everyone did, but did anyone happen to catch that little bit about that they don't have the scores of the disadvantaged schools yet? Did anyone hear that?
No.
Yeah.
You're right.
They don't have that yet.
Can I just jump in there
Wonderful.
as well? One of the things that you mentioned, Zoe, just before, you talked about whether it's measuring the right things. I think, in particular, NetPlan, it's available today. I haven't opened it. It makes me feel sick. Because in our school, we've got 200 students. I have 48 students with a diagnosis. Now, I'm talking a diagnosis from a pediatrician, a doctor, a speechy, or an OT. I'm not talking about the ones that we suspect. I'm talking about the ones that are diagnosed. Sometimes, and also with the complexity of some of what our little ones go through at home, sometimes the greatest achievement we can have for the day is that they're at school. And I think sometimes that in itself is worth celebrating. We've had kids that we've not met and they've made a friend, or they've had someone to talk to. We've had kids that have been at other schools who haven't been at school, and we've managed to get them here every day. To me, that is the greatest celebration we can possibly have. So, but it's difficult because we are measured against NetPlan, but there's it's not taken into consideration the complexity of some of the schools that we work in, and that's really difficult. I know NetPlan's been available since 6 o'clock this morning. I haven't looked at it yet because it's just really difficult because the stuff that we measure, I think, is the big stuff. And we measure the fact that these kids can communicate and they've got a friend and they're at school and they're happy, and that we provide breakfast for them every day and things like that. And that's not taken into account. And on that note, I will be quiet.
Elena?
Hi everyone, I know quite a few faces here. I'm Elena Wilson. I'm part of the MPF board and been lucky enough to be in the No Limits steering committee for quite a few years. Steph, I was just wondering, based on Zoe, your question on what does it look like from a Department of Education's point of view, and how come this is not recognised? I think there's some really exciting things happening with No Limits and the other educational programs that we are part of, and I was just wondering, Steph, if you'd have a chance to talk to that, of having the DET sitting on the steering committee, and then also what the future plans are for No Limits to actually get the recognition of the department.
Oh, thanks, Elena. Well, we do engage with DET as much as we possibly can. We have the the seal for the region on the steering committee. We talk with the regional director. We, as I say, try as hard as we can. They're pretty impenetrable, to be honest. They also have just been really clear that, you know, they're not going to tell any schools what to do. It's up to schools to make their own decisions. They did say, though, if we had 6 years data instead of 3, they'd be really, really interested in what that was. So I guess we want to push on and try and make it 6 years and see if we can fund it for another 3 years. I've been talking to the schools to, you know, they all want to do it. They'll put in as much money as they can to it, so that we can do it, but they can't do it all. They just can't afford it. And we need to continue to assist as much as we can. I think if we were to do that, we would want to try and get some greater leverage with the Department of Education, and I think we probably need to work really hard on that, and probably need some assistance to do that, I think, because we're through, you know, really generous donors. We're putting in a lot. We would have put in 1.2 million so far for the 3 years, and schools also contribute significantly, and we would need to do to try and keep doing that. But I'm noticing the time, and it's over our hour. So as with these things, sometimes you kind of really get into the meaty stuff when you're nearly at the end. But we do have a session next Tuesday and the following Tuesday as well, when we will, literacy will be a dominant issue, because next week we're talking about the upper primary work and then the Elevate work. And I'll just say about Elevate, which is a secondary school, when I spoke to them last week, they said they would have lost every single vulnerable student through this COVID, if not for Elevate. And it's purely because of the dedication and the teachers and the resources which have been supplied that we have, that they've even still have contact. So this work is really important, and our teachers are really important. I guess we'll have to stop now, and if people would like to come next Tuesday, we'd love to see you again. Jenny, Angela, Tina, Kerry, Shona, Megan, thank you all so much. Really appreciate all your. Thanks, everyone.